This video is a summary report on the booklet Mystery at Mile Marker 68. This is a report on an incident that happened near Stephen, Minnesota in 1979 where a UFO of some type or another attacked a sheriff's deputy. So we want to start out by telling you that this booklet will be available for sale, and there will be a link to how you can obtain one of these booklets should you so desire at the end of this video. Our story begins on Sunday, August 26, 1979. And at that time, Sheriff Deputy Val Johnson signed on for duty. Val Johnson is 35 years old. He's a resident of Oslo, Minnesota. And as a condition of standard protocol, he sets his watch and his patrol car dash clock to coincide with the Marshall County Office Dispatch Center's official time clock. His patrol duties that particular evening are routine. Nothing out of the ordinary occurs. On Monday morning at 12:30 a.m., he begins his patrol of the Stephen, Minnesota area. At about 1:30, as is documented in his logbook and in the sheriff's department's official logbook, he departs Stephen with intent to travel to his hometown of Oslo to finish up the remainder of his patrol duties for that patrol shift. At 1:30 a.m., he departs Stephen. He heads west on Marshall County number 5, and on his approach to Minnesota Highway 220, he notices an extremely bright light centered over the roadway about 2.5 miles to the south. At this point, he ponders what this might be, and his initial thoughts are that it may be a semi-truck having some trouble, or possibly maybe an airplane that's landed on the road is having some type of problem. He continues his travel southward. When he gets about 1.25 miles south of the Highway 220 Marshall County 5 intersection, suddenly, without warning, the light, the extremely bright light, accelerates towards him at a seemingly impossible rate and collides with his patrol car. The intense bright light causes immediate pain in his eyes. The last thing he can remember is the sound of breaking glass and his car brakes locking up. He is then rendered unconscious. Approximately 2:19, he awakes. When he awakes, he slowly opens his right eye and notes that the car's engine red light is on, indicating that the engine has stopped and is not running. His eyes are in intense pain. It has been 39 minutes since the encounter, and he immediately picks up the two-way radio microphone and radios Marshall County Dispatch for officer in need of assistance. Sheriff's Deputy Pete Bauer is the patrolman deputy that is currently at the dispatch center. Bauer immediately calls Deputy Greg Winskowski, who resides in Stephen, Minnesota, with information that it is imperative he respond to the distress call submitted by Deputy Johnson. So, Greg Winskowski takes off, and with no haste, proceeding to aid and assist a beleaguered Deputy Johnson. At the same time, Deputy Bauer radios Chief Deputy Doolittle, who calls Marshall County Sheriff Dennis Brecking, and they also proceed to the scene. On the way to the scene, just as Deputy Winskowski is leaving town, he encounters an oncoming vehicle. Not knowing if this vehicle, in fact, has gone by the scene or has probably been involved in whatever type of emergency situation Johnson is in, he stops the car and notes the license plate number and immediately takes off towards the scene of the incident. So, Winskowski gets to the scene of the incident, which is 11 miles away, in a total response time of 10 minutes. When he gets there, he notes that the car is sitting, Deputy Johnson's car is sitting sideways in the roadway. The lights are peering into an unharvested wheat field. There are skid marks for about 100 feet from where the car stopped to where the skid marks start. He immediately approaches Johnson's patrol car and notes that the windshield is shattered. His initial impression being that there's been a shotgun blast that has caused the damage to the windshield. He snaps open Johnson's door. Johnson is leaning against the steering wheel, his arms draping downward. There's a slight bump on his forehead, and he's confused and rambling. Greg asks, "What happened, Val?" And Val responds, "It was a bright light. It came through the windshield." In the meantime, Brecky and Doolittle are on the way, and Winskowski calls dispatch back and has an ambulance dispatched. The Stephen Volunteer Ambulance is dispatched at 2:36 a.m. The team members are Michael Jelness, owner of the Coast to Coast store, Clifford and Jean Nyland, owners of the Nyland's department store, and Danielle Winskowski, who happens to be Greg Winskowski's wife. At 3:05 a.m., Doolittle and Brecky arrive at the scene. In the meantime, Winskowski has been scouting the area, trying to figure out what other vehicles might have been involved in the incident. They note, the sheriff's deputies note that the two rooftop antennas are bent. They note dents in the front of the hood. They note the headlight is broken, and they also note that a warning light has been punctured. The ambulance arrives, and when that occurs, driver Mike Jelness notes also that Johnson is shivering and incoherent and thinks that he may be in a state of shock. And bewildered while he is looking around, trying to figure out what other vehicle might be involved in the incident. He is informed by Greg Winskowski there are no other vehicles. And Mike comically explains, well, must have been a UFO. The ambulance takes off and transports Johnson to the Warren Hospital. Brecky, Winskowski, and Doolittle scan the scene, looking for other evidence. It's a pitch dark night, and Deputy Doolittle has a camera with and some experience with photography techniques in the dead of night, and he captures the scene in the dead of night, showing the car sitting sideways in the road and the skid marks leading up to the car. The ambulance arrives at the hospital. Dr. Wilfred Pincinel examines Johnson and notes that he has severe conjunctivitis, which is a pink eye, and he indicates that it's similar to a welder's type of burn and is generally caused by intense ultraviolet radiation. Brecky starts the car up at the scene. It starts and operates without any additional help, and drives the car back to Warren and locks it in the Sheriff's Department's office. The next morning, it's at 4 a.m. when Pincinel is done treating Phil Johnson. He applies salve bandages to his eyes. Johnson is taken then over to the Sheriff's Department for audio taping the instances of the night. He can't write a report because his eyes are still bandaged. At 4 a.m. he makes that statement. At the end of the statement, at about 4:55 a.m., with the statement done, they inform Johnson that they're going to be taking him home soon. But Johnson decides, I should maybe call my wife and tell her I've been running a little late. And in doing that, with his eyes still bandaged, he stretches his arm out and asks Everett Doolittle, the deputy sitting next to him, what time it is so he can call his wife and tell her that he's been late and he'll be home pretty soon. And it's Everett Doolittle notices that the watch is missing 14 minutes. They don't think too much of it at the time and bring Johnson home to Oslo to get some well-needed sleep. At 7:30 a.m., Brecky and Doolittle examine the patrol car and they note damage. They note the inner front headlight is broken. They notice a circular dent in the hood. They note a dent in the hood above the brake master cylinder. They note the punctured plastic light dome. They note the roof antenna being bent at 80 degrees. They note the trunk antenna bent at 90 degrees. They note the windshield shattered with at least 3 separate fracture points. They note a slight indentation on the bumper. And strangely, they note that all of the damage occurs within a 12-inch wide area from front to back on the car. It is noted later that the car's battery won't hold the charge, and also, as noted later, is a crack in the instrument panel dash light. Brecky, who has been to some conferences regarding UFOs, has a toll-free number to the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois, and he calls and he speaks with Chief Investigator Alan Hendry. Hendry takes an immediate interest in the case and tells the Sheriff Brecky that he'll be in Warren the next day to assist Brecky with the investigation. That next morning, Brecky picks up Val Johnson at his home and transports him to Grand Forks to Dr. Protraska, who was an ophthalmologist. Dr. Protraska removes the bandages from Johnson's eyes and notes that there is no damage at this time and that all of the conjunctivitis has healed, and indicates that's not unusual and that 10 hours later it can be as short as 4 hours later that damage can clear up. Tuesday, the 28th, Hendry arrives in Warren. They examine, take more measurements and photographs of the car and return to the scene of the incident, along with Brecky, Doolittle, Winskowski, and other deputies. The deputies scan the area of the incident. They're looking for any anomalies. They're looking for disturbed roadside gravel. They're looking for airplane tire landing marks. They're looking for anything that is out of the ordinary. They find nothing out of the ordinary. Brecky schedules a news conference for Wednesday at 2 p.m. A lot of the local press are there, including the Minneapolis Tribune, the Grand Forks Herald, Fargo Forum, the Warren Chief, and the Stephen Messenger. They play the audio tape that Deputy Pete Bauer kept covering the audio remarks. They share the logbook that Deputy Winskowski kept and present all the facts to the media that they had occurred up to that time. When the investigation starts, the first thing that they ponder is the eye damage, the pain, and conjunctivitis irritation. Well, interestingly, they note that the windshield transmittance property almost completely obstructs any ultraviolet passage of energy. So they're puzzled at that point as to how that damage could have occurred. Dr. Wallace Lamb, who is Val Johnson's optometrist, suggests that maybe it was infrared heat. Although Johnson was wearing photo-gray lenses, the infrared heat should not have been able to penetrate his eyeglasses, so that was a puzzling fact that they couldn't come up with any explanation for. They call the Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company sends their windshield glass expert, a fellow by the name of Murdian French. Murdian French examines the car, and particularly the windshield. And in his examination, he takes traces of the crack patterns on the inside laminate of the windshield and on the exterior part of the windshield. And he notes 4 separate fracture incidents. I'm going to point them out here. The first impact, what he determined, was from a hard object, what he said could be similar to like a golf ball, softball, baseball, rubber mallet, or tightly closed fist. The second fracture was caused, in his opinion, from an internal bending stress, either applied from the inside of the windshield or some type of negative pressure on the exterior of the windshield. The third impact was from an extremely hard object that impacted the outer laminate and cracked the outer laminate, but was of insufficient force to cause any damage to the inner laminate. And the fourth fracture point was from a bending stress applied from an external source that occurred in the outer laminate. And it was his professional opinion that all 4 of those incidents occurred within several milliseconds of each other. The bent antennas, the broken headlight glass, and the remaining glass from the punctured warning light were sent to Honeywell Industries in Minneapolis for forensic analysis. Dr. Roland Wardell, who is an expert and has 23 experience as a supervisor at Honeywell, examined and made a report on the antennas. They noted in the report that none of the bug residue had been scraped off of the antennas and that there was no particle incident damage on them. They were at a loss to explain how the bending could have occurred. They did a strength analysis hardness test on the antennas in the vicinity of the bend and noted that heat was not a factor in the bending. They did a spectral analysis on the glass fragments and on the broken warning light lens, and to determine if any radioactivity was involved. None was noted. French's conclusion was that their impacts with stones were unlikely and that he had a loss of any rational explanation to determine what would have caused the antenna. The inspectors contacted a firm from central Minnesota to do a radar coverage of the area with infrared. The infrared test concluded that of the 4 square miles photographed, there was only one area of about 60 feet square directly east of where the car ended up, and that it was of a high reflectance, indicating that there possibly could have been either some crop damage, or over-fertilizing of the area, or something else that may have caused that high reflectance in that area. Nothing was found. A soil sample was planned to be taken in that area and analyze the soil, but unfortunately the field was plowed under before that could occur. The mystery of the delayed timepieces was thought that maybe there was a magnetic field that could have caused the wristwatch and the car's dashboard clock to somehow been subjected to a magnetic field and causing the 14-minute time delay. They sent a magnetometer to the Sheriff's Department, and Deputy Sheriff Greg Winskowski used his car, and they compared the magnetic mapping on his car with Johnson's car and noticed no appreciable damage. In an interview that I had with Deputy Winskowski, he indicated that he recalled there being a neighbor to the scene of the incident that also had a time delay on one of their clocks. I contacted an individual by the name of Robert Oseski, who in fact told me, yes, that's true. I did have a clock that exhibited a 14-minute time delay, and I still have that clock. And I indicated I'd like to get a picture of that clock. He stopped by with the clock, and I got his picture with it. And in addition to that, he said, here, you can have the clock for your display. So we have the actual clock that Robert Olszewski's been using for the last 45 years and never had another time delay issue with it. Meridian French, the fellow from Ford, indicated that he would be happy to take paint samples back for analysis, but the Sheriff's Department wouldn't allow that because it would cause some destruction to the side panels of the car to get the metal pieces cut off. The hood dents were a mystery. One of the hood dents was circular in nature, and the other was located right above the brake master cylinder. If it had been stones or some sort that had caused damage to the car, the fact that the dents in the hood were caused from a downward force does not explain how stones could have been involved in that. Val Johnson's physical condition right after the incident were that he had headaches for a short period of time. On his visit to his local dentist, the dentist noticed that his bridge work, which had been fine 2 weeks before, was all damaged, and some of the dental work would have to be redone. Johnson had no pain or swelling associated with the damage to the dental work. In 1980, there was a conference in Manitoba that took a look at the Val Johnson UFO incident. They determined that ball lightning probably was not a factor. They determined that the 39 minutes of missing time was highly unusual. They determined that the incident should be labeled as unknown. When asked at the conference if Val had had any strange dreams or similar occurrences after that, he indicated, there is a phrase that comes to mind to me for some reason in my subconscious that I have no way of explaining, and it remains there kind of stuck in my mind like a McDonald's commercial, and that phrase is, I am committed. During Greg's Winskowski's interview, he indicated that the glass that they found on the highway was 856 feet from where the skid mark started, and that the glass, as would not be expected, was found just laying in a pile on the road. It wasn't scattered about, as if the incident with the headlight had happened when the car was traveling at a highway speed. Greg indicated this information on what happened on his arrival on the scene. He indicated that Val Johnson's first statement was, it was a bright light that went through the windshield. And he's also indicated that Robert Olszewski might be a viable contact as a neighbor that had time missing from his bedroom clock. The investigators also looked at the possibility of the fact that maybe this was a hoax perpetrated by Johnson, or maybe he had been hot rodding and done some damage to the car. The hot rodding incident was ruled out because it did not explain how the antennas were bent, it did not explain how the headlight could have been broken without damaging the headlight frame, and it did not explain how the windshield could have been damaged without damaging the frame of the windshield, or how it could have caused the dents in the hood. A hoax being perpetrated by Val Johnson was investigated. Val Johnson was a police officer of a high credibility. His personal demeanor ruled out suspicion of a hoax, and the attempt to try and explain all the damage to the car in the context of a hoax, nothing just seemed to add up in that regard. The bent antennas are the most perplexing part of the mystery. If Johnson wanted to perpetrate a hoax, why would he decide to bend the antennas? Bent antennas due to a UFO collision of any nature is an anomaly. It has not occurred in any other reported UFO incident, and the fact that it happened in Val Johnson's case has no bearing on the fact that he could have perpetrated a hoax. An airplane collision was considered as a part of the investigation, and maybe that is what had caused the damage to the car and the burns to Johnson's eyes. However, a landing light, airplane landing light, could not have been brilliant enough to cause the eye damage. There were no skid marks attributed to an airplane landing, and the fact that the airplane light was, or the bright light was 2.5 miles away doesn't explain why they would have needed more than 2,000 feet of runway for taking off from a dark, because it could not account for the damage to the hood, the damage to the antennas, or the dent on the bumper. In addition, there was another incident in Vermillion, South Dakota that occurred 2 days to the hour from the Val Johnson incident. And it involved an individual in Vermillion, South Dakota that was traveling at about midnight when a bright light approached him out of the west and collided with his car, although it did not cause him any physical or did not cause any damage to the car. But the witness reported that he felt he was inside of a light bulb. There are additional 20 other encounters that occurred in this area in the time period from the late 60s up until about the 90s. And they're delineated in the mile marker mystery book. So this incident is still unsolved, remains an enigma. The United States began investigating UFO incidents in 1948. This book by Jerome Clark, the UFO book, 705 pages long. The author, Jerome Clark, indicates in this book that this incident, the Val Johnson UFO incident, he says it must be judged one of the most remarkable and evidential UFO cases ever recorded. Newsweek magazine rated the Johnson UFO incident in the top 10 mysteries in the United States history. Minopedia, which is an internet-based Wikipedia site pertaining to people, places, and things important in Minnesota history, indicated as one of the most credible UFO encounters in United States history. The booklet, Mystery at Mile Marker 68, is a 68-page report on the Val Johnson UFO incident. It includes 20 pages of pictures, photos, copies of the sheriff's original reports, copies of Honeywell's reports, copies of the aerial infrared report, a nice picture of Bob Leseski with the clock he gave the museum for the display.